said no, no, no. I said no, 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 no. No, 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 no.
Me encanta la música de toca, toca, toca. Hasta la vida loca, 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 loca. Me encanta.
So at this point in the My Hero Academia story, it would seem as though we have an ever-growing surplus of villains. With the infamy of figures like Stain having spread, and the one symbol of peace, All Might, having stepped down, we now have plenty of villains to consider. However, have you ever considered the fact that at this point in the story, we have but a single prominent female villain, Toga Himiko? A bit strange considering how many girls are in Class 1A alone, but maybe Horikoshi just wanted her to be the center of attention, with no rivals to challenge her villainous spotlight. Whatever the case, Toga is a character who's been with the League of Villains since what I consider to be the group's true beginning. With the ideals of Stain acting as a sort of call to action for her and many others, she quickly proved herself to be an invaluable asset to Shigaraki's plans. She is essentially the villainous embodiment of the phrase, "Don't let that pretty face fool you." And with that nearly vampiric quirk of hers, it's almost as if she was born to spread fear throughout society, effectively making it a bit difficult to imagine her on the other side of the spectrum. But with this video, we'll of course be doing just that, exploring what Toga Himiko would have been like as a hero. Now be warned, we will be delving a bit into spoiler territory as to get the clearest picture of this alternate timeline as possible. So, to my anime onlys, this is probably your best opportunity to head out, but to those of you who remain, thank you for doing so. And remember to subscribe to the channel, because when it comes to bringing you unique yet in-depth My Hero Academia content like this, nobody does it better than Plot Armor. But that's enough of that, let's get started. So for Toga, the immediate concept that came to my mind was the blood sample hero. Right off the bat, I think our best course of action would be to repurpose what is quite literally the bloodthirsty quirk, Transform. The unfortunate reality of the My Hero Academia world is that Chisaki, despite being a villainous madman, wasn't entirely wrong when he described quirks to be a disease. Toga to me, like pretty much every other villain of the series, was to a certain degree a victim to her own quirk. Her quirk-based disposition towards blood led to opioid-like cravings she was essentially forced to suppress for the entirety of her young life on account of current legislation and the comfort of others. Rather than having her difference be embraced and facilitated in a functional capacity, she was forced by her parents and pressured by her juvenile quirk therapy to be normal and live by the standards of others. And so to shift her in the opposite direction, rather than having her suppress her abilities and cravings until the mask finally broke, let's make it so that the mask satisfied her cravings and allowed for the appropriate use of her abilities. The only socially acceptable way for Toga to even use her quirk would be by means of another person's consent to drink their blood. Which just sounds like a really strange conversation to have, but I'd imagine that under heroic pretense would at the very least be a tad bit more appropriate. Take that a bit further, and you have the widely culturally accepted process of blood donation. As a full-fledged hero, Toga could end up becoming the poster girl for blood donation as a whole, as she could be supplied with blood samples by way of fan donations. And in knowing the sort of followings that characters like Mount Lady and Midnight have, for me, it's not too hard to imagine that sort of dedication. If nothing else, this sort of publicity would be majorly beneficial to the medical field, making her heroic in another sense altogether. In terms of how she'd go about using her quirk, she'd most likely be an espionage, infiltration, and information gathering hero. She could blend into crowds undetected, take on the guise of some underworld or villainous figures, trick suspects into full confessions, you name it. Like honestly, forget Hawks, the Public Safety Commission would absolutely love her. However, on that note, I will admit that with the combination of her quirk and reliance on public support, there is a bit of an issue. With disguises being her bread and butter, it'd actually be a bit difficult for her to be given credit for her various accomplishments, even more so if her proceedings are to be kept secret for the sake of the mission. So in that case, she'd probably have to go the celebrity hero route and do a whole lot of ad campaigns and things like that, similar to the snake hero Uabami. But to be completely honest with you, we are only just scratching the surface when it comes to her quirk potential here. Because of her quirk awakening during the My Villain Academia arc, more than just assuming the physical appearance of others, with enough prior knowledge, Toga can now use their quirks as well. And that is major, especially when considering the support she would have from her fellow pro heroes, most of which having visual demonstrations of their quirks readily accessible online. It'd be as simple as research, observe, and apply, and she'd be able to become a one-woman army, an incredible heroic multi-tool that would put the likes of Monoma to shame. And because she can now switch appearances on the fly without needing to revert to her true form, she could perform combo level super moves all by her lonesome. And with that, she'd not only have the support of fans, but also her fellow pro heroes, who'd by extension benefit in terms of publicity as well, without having even done anything besides provide her with a sample of their blood. So in her case, much to Stain's dismay, popularity would have an almost direct correlation to her power potential. A virtually endless supply of blood would be at her disposal. Another application of her quirk I have considered that arguably bridges the gap between this series and our Quirk Evolution series would be the use of non-human blood. As far as we have seen, there is no stipulation in place to discourage such a notion. In fact, her instinctual attraction to the blood of a wounded bird points towards such a possibility. With the advent of quirks, the complexity of the human genome has reached an all-time high, so I don't see why not. And with that sort of potential, you're looking at a combination of Robin's intellect and combative prowess and Beast Boy's animal-based shapeshifting. Yeah, forget ever truly tracking her down, or ever keeping her bound if you manage to even do so. Now, as we briefly touched upon, beyond her quirk, Toga is also a rather exceptional acrobat. The simple fact that she was able to outmaneuver the likes of Eraserhead should speak for itself. So then applying that skill set of hers onto the bodies of others could yield some incredible results. Now, in regards to her equipment, my first thought was that there would be no way she'd be allowed to keep her knives, as the depiction doesn't exactly scream heroism. But thinking about it a bit further, Snipe literally walks around with a gun, so I don't see why she couldn't cut a bitch. Right now, Toga is not only the only prominent female villain in the series, but also the youngest commander of the Paranormal Liberation Front. The fact that she is this damn capable at such a young age with no formal training is astounding, to the point where I'd have to label her a prodigy, and I'd imagine Yue would do the same were she to have gone there. And if there's anyone I could imagine having instructed or guided her, it would have to be the homeroom teacher of Class 1B, Vlad King. A sort of protege situation similar to the current relationship between Aizawa and Shinso. And to be completely honest with you, my thinking behind this just stemmed from the fact that he also has a blood-related quirk. But no, seriously, with the excess amounts of blood he possesses and his invulnerability to blood loss, she could have transformed into him indefinitely. Truthfully, transform might be a difficult ability to train in the same way you'd approach most, but if there's hope for characters like Shinso and Monoma, there would definitely be hope for Toga. And if nothing else, you could argue that it inherently lends itself towards a reliance on others. A very shonen theme indeed. Another thing to bear in mind when thinking of Toga would be that despite being a fighter, she is very much a lover as well, although often expressing it in rather obscene ways. Despite her going down the hero path, I don't believe that what she finds attractive would necessarily change. Her feelings towards Deku, for instance, seem to be physical as indicated by the visuals of the boy he reminds her of, but also mental, as she genuinely, despite being a villain herself, seems to, on a certain level, admire his heroic spirit. So, in this far more tame case, I figure he could serve to be a major source of inspiration for her, just as he seems to be for Uraraka, a standard to strive towards. Toga, from the very moment she entered the fray, proved herself to be a source of intrigue that still fascinates me to this day. And ultimately, I feel as though the current state of society failed her, and with no one to confide in and no proper outlet for her cravings, she fell prey to her own demons until she became one herself. If you're a Toga fan, beyond what is of course a really good character design, what fascinates you most about her? For me, it would honestly have to be the hopeless romantic angle. The characters she has affection for are at this point straight up scared of her, which makes her efforts of pursual all the more interesting to watch. But of course, also let me know what you guys think about the blood sample hero, Toga-chan, in the comments below, along with what character you'd like us to turn into a hero.
What the hell is Toga listening to?
If I drink someone's blood, I can turn into them. Whatever I take in turns into energy, so the more I drink, the longer I can hold on to the form. One cup lets me look and sound like someone for about a day. Plus, if I drink a bunch of different people's blood at the same time, I can turn into any of them. I can recreate their clothes too, but they get layered under my own, so it helps to get naked before I transform, which can be a little embarrassing sometimes.
Oh no, I'm not gonna break her Nico kneecaps. I'm gonna break her Nico neck.